Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson. Tonight is Joe Biden's first day in office, and you know what that means. CNN can finally take that COVID death ticker off the screen. There's no reason for it now. It's not like you can blame Joe Biden for some Chinese virus that escaped from a lab in Wuhan. That wouldn't be fair. Come on now. CNN dutifully removed it this morning. COVID deaths? Settle down, America. It's just a bad flu season. Joe Biden apparently agrees. He and his family were photographed in Washington last night without masks. But not a big deal, explained his flack today. Quote, he was celebrating a historic day in our country. We have bigger things to worry about. Okay, makes sense. By the way, what are those bigger things that Joe Biden is worrying about? Well, since this happens to be Joe Biden's maiden day on the job, we can actually answer that question with some specificity. You can tell what people care most about by what's at the top of their to-do lists. At the top of Joe Biden's to-do list were two things: opening the borders and crushing our country's last remaining independent economic sector. So that's what he's doing. First, Biden signed an executive order revoking the permit for the Keystone XL pipeline. Now, no matter how you feel about fossil fuel, and if you drive a car or fly on airplanes or use the hospital or enjoy electricity, you might want to think carefully about how you feel about fossil fuel. There is no question, and there's no getting around the economic effect of this decision. Millions of Americans don't have jobs right now. But with a single shaky signature, Joe Biden just put another 11,000 people out of work in this country, just like that. But he wasn't done. Biden also instructed the Department of Homeland Security to halt deportations of illegal aliens. And when we say illegal aliens, and by the way, pretty soon we won't be allowed to say illegal aliens because it'll be hate speech and therefore illegal. But tonight, when we say illegal aliens, we mean millions of illegal aliens, not just the countless undocumented Americans that Joe Biden tells us are busy curing cancer, winning Nobel Prizes, and in general being a lot more impressive than you have ever been. But this doesn't apply simply to them. Biden's order also includes non-Nobel Prize winning illegal aliens. That means criminals, rapists, murderers, other people who are dangerous to you and me. So the message is clear. If you break our laws to get here and commit violent felonies once you arrive, sometimes against American citizens, Joe Biden will reward you with blanket amnesty. And just to show how much he means it, Joe Biden will do that on his very first day as president. It's a pretty strong statement. So why wouldn't, seeing that statement, every poor person in the world sneak into America? Well, of course they would. You would, we would, and they will. Increasing the size of America's population is the whole point of the exercise, and Joe Biden himself explained that when he first started running for president.
We could afford to take in a heartbeat another 2 million people. The idea that a country of 330 million people cannot absorb people who are in desperate need and who are justifiably fleeing oppression is absolutely bizarre. Absolutely bizarre. I would also move to increase the total number of immigrants able to come to the United States.
We can afford to take another 2 million people in a heartbeat, explained Joe Biden. Really? Can we? We're that rich a country. Are we getting a lot richer? Have you done the math on that, Mr. President? How exactly did you calculate those numbers? Can we see them? Unfortunately, we can't see those numbers. Joe Biden's not a numbers guy. Joe Biden is all heart, closer to a religious leader than an accountant. And that's why in his first address from the Oval Office, Joe Biden unveiled a bust of Cesar Chavez, the famed left-wing labor leader who led the Great Pickers Union in California in the 60s and 70s. Our easily impressed friends in the media were, needless to say, easily impressed by this. They saw it as a gesture of racial solidarity or something. Biden's Cesar Chavez bust in the Oval signals a new era for Latinos, activists hope, read a totally real headline in the Washington Post. It's all pretty hilarious if you know anything about Cesar Chavez. Chavez the man, not the bronze image in the Oval Office. The real Cesar Chavez passionately hated illegal immigration. He said so all the time. He never stopped saying it. Immigration lowers the wages of American workers. That's the whole point of it, of course. Cesar Chavez wasn't well educated, but he was not stupid. He understood exactly what was going on. He was enraged by the efforts to open our border with Mexico. He knew it was another corporate scam posing as a human rights imperative. We must! Right. When the government refused to secure the border, Cesar Chavez's men did it themselves. In the winter of 1979, look it up, members of Chavez's union, the United Fruit Workers, formed what they called a human wet line. as in wetback, their word, not ours, across the southern desert and brutally assaulted Mexican nationals trying to come north for work. Cesar Chavez's men hit them with chains. That happened, for real. That's the guy Joe Biden just told us he reveres. No one believes that. No one who knows anything. No one in Central America believes that, believes Joe Biden really has any idea who Cesar Chavez was. All they know is that amnesty has been announced, so of course they're coming. Why wouldn't they? 100 days, they know the details already. Better than most Americans do. He's going to help all of us. And they're right. All of us includes people like Luciano Dominguez Trejo. He was arrested in this country for sexually assaulting a minor. Thanks to Joe Biden, he gets to stay here. So does Juan Hernandez Rodriguez. Rodriguez is a self-described gang member with convictions for felony grand theft and burglary. He's been ordered removed from this country 5 separate times, but he's still here. Now he's staying. So is Atancio Areno Gutierrez, another convicted gang member, convicted of felony burglary. Also Luis Rodriguez Jacobo, convicted of manslaughter. Santos Maria won't be going anywhere either. He was also convicted of manslaughter along with armed robbery. When Joe Biden tells you the real threat to our country comes from within, these are definitely not the people he's talking about. Of course, he's talking about you. He's certainly not talking about Fernando de Jesus Lopez Garcia. Like millions of people in California, Lopez Garcia is living in this country illegally. He's been arrested multiple times for violent crimes, but the state of California has allowed him to stay in order not to seem racist. Then finally, inevitably, in November, this happened. It was a failure of multiple systems. No, it wasn't. Our systems work. We just don't use them. It was a failure of will. It was our country perverted by bad ideas, self-destructive, suicidal ideas, which seem to have taken hold among the people in charge. Immigration law exists to keep things like the things you just saw from happening. In a typical 100-day period last year, for example, federal ICE agents removed 46,800 immigrants with criminal convictions or pending criminal charges. That's a lot of people, 46,000. Now they're all staying. And that's fine with Joe Biden. It's not like they're trying to operate a restaurant in New Jersey during quarantine or walk through a park without a mask on. They're not criminals. They're civil rights heroes. One thing for certain, they're definitely not aliens. And that's another change we learned about this week. Henceforth, the totally moderate and not at all radical Biden administration demands that federal agencies refer to illegal aliens as, quote, non-citizens. Now, that's less precise, obviously, but it's way less racist, so it's better. Joe Biden himself is going to try to remember this. Less than a year ago, he kept forgetting, was still using the wrong term.
There are certain things you cannot deport an undocumented alien for, an undocumented person for.
Undocumented alien. Oh, sorry, undocumented person. Whew, that was close. At 78, Joe Biden narrowly avoided a moment of white supremacy on television. But rest assured, Joe Biden is careful with his language. He knows that in the name of unity, people should not be allowed to use certain words or have certain thoughts. Everyone must think exactly the same thing all the time. Now, if that seems like mandatory conformity to you and terrifying, no, it's unity. And that's why on the Biden administration's website, you can now select your preferred pronouns as you fill out the contact form. Bigotry has met its defeat on the White House website. Hallelujah. We do have one nagging question, though. What exactly is the point of all of this, these things that have been done in the last 24 hours? Will any of these changes, these bigger things that Joe Biden has enacted on his very first day in office, actually help any living American? We're pretty sure the pronoun thing will appeal to whatever tiny group of deluded, unhappy people still believe that destroying nature's gender roles is a form of liberation. Talk about a war on nature. So they're very excited. Congrats to them. But what about everyone else? How, for example, does amnesty and the waves of mass illegal immigration that inevitably will follow make this a better, more united country? You're not supposed to ask that question, but it's totally fair. The rest of us live here. We have a right to know. How does this make our country better and more united? Anyone who tries to answer that question, not that anyone has so far, but anyone who does, should first have to explain whatever happened to the state of California, the state with the most illegal immigration by far. How exactly in the course of a single generation did the best state in the union become the worst state? How did the place that so many Americans desperately wanted to move to become the place that millions of Americans are fleeing? Honestly, what's the answer to that question? No one in the media asked today, but during the briefing, the question of immigration did come up. And here's how the new White House press secretary responded to it.
Immigration we consider as part of racial equity and part of which is a broad issue, but that's how the president has spoken about that crisis over the past several months. And clearly it is an enormous priority to him.
So there you go. That's the answer, I guess. The Biden administration's immigration plan is not designed to improve the United States of America. It's not intended to make Americans happier or richer or more secure or more united. Now, you might think those would be the aims of every government policy always, but no, not in this case. The point of Joe Biden's immigration plan is, quote, racial equity. Now, we've got to be completely honest with you and say that we're not exactly sure what that means. The point is racial equity. Unfortunately, nobody asked. In the coming weeks, we're going to do our best to find out. Since this is a government policy, it matters and we have a right to know. But as of tonight, it sounds a lot like punishment. Mass immigration, explains Joe Biden, isn't something that will make your life better. It's something you deserve. Ned Ryan is the CEO of American Majority. He joins us tonight. I'm just so struck by this, Ned. People have debates over policy, what's good for the country, what's not good for the country. I think honest people can disagree. I've changed my view on a lot of things.
Right.
I have never seen an announcement of such huge policies made without any reference at all to their effect on the American population. It's like that's not even up for discussion whether it's good for us. We're doing it.
That's right. No, it's because it's very clear from their actions. It's the American people are not even an afterthought. They're clearly not a priority. I mean, my thought as I'm listening to your monologue is, what's the point of calling yourself a sovereign nation if there's no enforceable borders? If we're just going to tell the world, feel free to come and literally hop on our social welfare programs, which are failing, by the way, which, oh, by the way, the other amazing part to me, Tucker, about this idiocy on the immigration front, we're literally going to be importing small cities of low-skilled or unskilled workers every month into our country in the face of automation. What are we going to do when they're out of work, when their jobs are automated? Throw them onto our social welfare programs? How are we going to fund that? Well, the American people are going to get taxed more draconian taxes to actually fund it. You're going to be working for the state before you know it. There is nothing right now, and I would argue Republicans are the same way, that prioritizes the interests of the American worker and the American taxpayer. That's why Trump. I mean, the amazing part in all of this, Tucker, is that nobody in D.C., establishment, Democrats or Republicans, want to even ask the question, why did Trump win? Oh, I don't know, maybe because he stood up and said, hey, here's a shocking concept. Why don't we actually prioritize the American worker and the American taxpayer in advance and promote their interests and policies that do that? And nobody wants to ask that question.
You don't even hear it. You don't even hear it raised. I mean, if you cared about the country, and no matter what your voting history was, you would say it's a pretty volatile time in American history. We actually could, have real unrest. Maybe radical change is not a good idea now. Maybe we shouldn't change the way we vote or change who lives here by the millions overnight. Maybe that much volatility could break the country. I haven't heard one person say that. We're the liberals of goodwill and good faith, of patriotic liberals saying, let's just settle down for a second. Where are those people?
Do they still exist? I mean, serious question, Tucker. I'm not sure that they actually exist anymore as the left has completely taken over the Democratic Party. I mean, you made an interesting point. The fact that Biden made immigration, killing the Keystone Pipeline, removing the Mexico City language that now uses taxpayer dollars to fund overseas abortions, and, oh, by the way, an executive order for biological males to go and play on girls' teams and be in their locker rooms shows his priorities. None of those have anything to do with any of the Americans' priorities in regards to actually how do we get back to work, how do we stop these stupid lockdowns, how do we go back to normal. And it showed all of his priorities are the far left because they've taken over the party. There aren't any rational liberals left inside the Democratic Party, and if they are, they've been silenced.
I don't think there's a single survey you can find, a real one, that shows any of those issues on the top 10 list for anybody. For anybody.
No.
Only the super unhappy activist groups whose lives depend on pushing for some new and exotic attack on nature are in politics, I'd say.
But the amazing part is each one of those issues actually goes after the pipe workers. They endorse Biden. He does this. It costs them tens of thousands of jobs. Importing low-skilled labor is going to hurt the minority, especially the black community. all of this stuff with the biological males is going to hurt the suburban moms and their daughters' athletic careers. Like, these are the people that voted for Biden. What were you doing?
No, he's following the orders of his corporate masters, obviously.
That's right.
Ned, it's great to see you tonight.
Right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tucker.
Well, we've been against, obviously, violence and terrorism since the day the show went on the air. But last time we told you ought to pause and think deeply about this new administration's war on domestic terrorism and what it means and what effect it might have on your ability to live in this country as a free citizen. A member of Congress by the name of Brad Schneider lashed out at us and accused us of supporting death and killing for raising those questions. We asked him to come on the show tonight. Of course, he didn't because he's afraid. But we've thought deeply about what he said, and we'll respond to it after the break.
Good evening, everybody. Not even a full day, and President Biden swearing in his political appointees, and the president taking some time to reminisce of a private dinner that he shared with the leader of China.
I was asked a long time ago when I was with Xi Jinping, and I was on the Tibetan plateau with him, and he asked me in a private dinner, he and we each had an interpreter. He said, "Can you define America for me?" And I said, yes, and I meant it. I said, I can do it in one word, possibilities.
A short conversation. Well, now with a new administration in place, what are the possibilities of resolving all of the issues that separate the United States and China? Will President Biden continue his predecessor's tough position on trade and China's expansionist policies? Or will we see a return to China's unchallenged theft of billions of U.S. intellectual property, continued theft of U.S. technology, and more confrontations in the South China Sea? We'll take that up with Asia expert Gordon Chang here later in the broadcast. Tonight's big story, the continued violence in this country of the radical left and war on the left-wing violence in the Northwest. Correspondent Dan, it's suitable that it should be Antifa and Black Lives Matter actually moving into the streets of Seattle and Portland with their customary violence and disregard for law. Dan Springer, thank you so much as always for your outstanding reporting. Dan Springer. Politico today reporting lawmakers are talking about the possibility of requiring only 3 days to carry out an impeachment trial against former President Donald Trump. The Dems and the Rhinos obviously believe they don't have any responsibility for due process for the former president, nor to consider evidence. For those who are counting, this will be the 6th year of the radical Dems' persecution against the president. Without evidence, and throughout, they have only shown themselves to be nothing less than contemptible in their disregard for their power, for the law, and truth. When it comes to the evidence against him, the radical Dems and 10 Rhinos voted to impeach the president after only 2 hours. Extraordinary. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi ignoring her constitutional duty, ignoring the former president's constitutional right to both free speech and to due process, which they are violating. Despite the promise of unity from President Biden, nothing resembling peace will result if the radical Dems persist with their vicious assault against the former president. It is the height of contradiction and hypocrisy for these Democrats to speak about healing, all the while attacking President Trump and the 74 million Americans who voted for him, while violating his constitutional rights and abusing their power. It is clear what the left-wing activists and the deep state would like to do to President Trump, his family, his supporters, and those leftists are only deepening the division and fomenting conflict among Americans. For more on the Democrats' push for impeachment of a man who no longer is in the White House, we turn to Mike Emanuel with the latest. Mike.
Lou, good evening. Today, the new Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell pushed for a commitment from his counterpart Chuck Schumer to save the legislative filibuster.
If the talk of unity and common ground is to have meaning, and certainly if the rules from 20 years ago are to be our guide, then I cannot imagine the Democratic leader would rather hold up the power-sharing agreement than simply reaffirm that his side won't be breaking this standing rule of the Senate.
The new majority leader is seeking unity to quickly confirm the Biden cabinet.
We got bipartisan cooperation so that Avril Haines is now the DNI. We're hopeful we can get the same bipartisan cooperation for Treasury, State, Homeland Security, and Defense very soon. We need these positions filled quickly. We need our Republican colleagues to cooperate.
House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is also being questioned over how a Senate impeachment trial of a now former president is going to help with unity.
You don't say to a president, do whatever you want in the last months of your administration. You're going to get a get out of jail card free because people think we should make nice and forget that people died here on January 6th.
And today, the House GOP leader said for all the unity talk, the president's executive actions are not addressing the urgent needs of Americans.
That is why I was disappointed to see within hours of assuming office, the new administration was more interested in helping illegal immigrants than helping our own citizens. More interested in virtue signals to the climate activists than supporting the union workers who were building the Keystone Pipeline.
The day after inauguration, in many respects, it is back to the same old battles. Lou?
Mike, thank you very much. Mike Emanuel reporting from Washington. Only hours after his inauguration, President Biden's first order of business was to sign 17 executive actions, a number of them, as we have just heard, having to do only with illegal immigration. President Biden declared his desire for open borders by protecting illegal immigrants from first deportation, counting illegal immigrants into the census, of course, and stopping construction of President Trump's border wall. But back in 2006, then Senator Joe Biden sounded like an entirely different person when he bragged that he went against the Democrat Party line and backed a border fence. Biden said this then, quote, "I voted for a fence. I voted, unlike most Democrats, and some of you won't like it, I voted for 700 miles of fence." And so they did. But then they broke their words and ignored the law that they passed and never built the fence. Another executive order yesterday signed by President Biden mandating the wearing of a mask while on federal property. The president calling mask wearing patriotic. Yet only hours after signing that order, President Biden visited the Lincoln Memorial, where he stood, as you see there, at the foot of Lincoln, not wearing a mask. The Lincoln Memorial is, of course, federal property. A new poll finds that America's trust in the media is at an all-time low. According to the poll from Edelman, only 46% of Americans trust traditional media. 58% of Americans say most news organizations care more about ideology and politics than informing the public. 56% say the media purposely tries to mislead the public. Those numbers seem to me rather generous on the part of the public. Up next, deep state status quo. President Biden keeping a key figure in the Obamagate Stonewall in power. Good job, Christopher Wray. We'll tell you who. Oh, I did, didn't I? I let it slip. We take it up next with Congressman Jim Jordan. Stay with us. We'll be right back.